Hello, welcome to Biology, the Scientific Study of Life. The fossil record chronicles life on Earth. Questions about the early stages in the origin of life on Earth may never be fully answered because, as far as we know, there is no record of these ancient events. Many later events, however, as are we documented in the fossil record. Careful study of fossils opens a window into the lives of organisms that existed long ago and provides information about the evolution of life over billions of years. How rocks and fossils are dated. Recall from chapter 25 that most fossils are found in sedimentary rocks. The trapping of dead organisms in sediments freezes fossils in time. Thus, the fossils in each stratum of sedimentary rock are a local sample of the organisms that existed when the sediments that formed the stratum was deposited. Because younger sediments are superimposed on older ones, this book of sedimentary pages tells the relative ages of fossils. Notice this figure. Boom. The strata at one location can often be correlated with the strata at another location by the presence of similar fossils, known as index fossils. The best index fossils for correlating strata that are far apart are the shells of marine organisms that were widespread. Index fossils reveal that at any particular location there are likely to be gaps in the sequence. That location may have been above sea level during certain periods, and thus no sedimentation occurred, or some of the sedimentary layers that were deposited when the location was submerged may have been eroded away. The relative sequences of fossils in rock strata tells the order in which the fossils were laid down, but it does not tell us their ages. Examining the relative positions in fossils in strata, like peeling layers of wallpaper from a very old house that has had many occupants, you can determine the sequences in which the layers were applied, but not the year each layer was added. Geologists have developed several methods of obtaining absolute data for fossiling. Note that absolute dating does not mean errorless dating, but only that age is given in years rather than relative terms such as before and after. When the most common technique is radiometric dating, which is based on the decay of radioactive isotopes. Each radioactive isotope has a fixed rate of decay and isotope's half-life. The number of years it takes for 50% of the original sample to decay is unaffected by temperature, pressure, and other environmental variables. Fossils contain isotopes of elements that accumulated in the organisms when they were alive. For example, the carbon in living organisms, including the most common carbon isotopes, carbon-12, as well as a radioactive isotopes, carbon-14. When the organism dies, it stops accumulating carbon, and the carbon-14 that it contained at the time of death slowly decays and becomes another element, nitrogen-14. Thus, by measuring the ratio of carbon-14 to total carbon or to nitrogen-14 in a fossil, we can determine the fossil's age with a half-life of 5,730 years. Carbon-14 is useful for dating fossils up to about 75,000 years old. Fossils older than that contain too little carbon-14 to be detected with current techniques. After 13 half-lives, 74,490 years, a fossil contains only half to the power 13 that was of the carbon 14 that was present when the fossil formed. Radioactive isotopes with longer half-lives are used to date older fossils. Paleontologists can often determine the age of fossil sandwiches between layers of volcanic rocks by measuring the amount of the radioactive isotopes. Potassium-40 in those layers, notice that. Potassium-40 decays to the chemically inreactive gas argon organ 40, which is trapped in the rock. When the rock is heated during a volcanic eruption, the organ is driven off, but the potassium remains. This risks the clock for potassium 40 decay to zero. The current ratio of potassium 40 to argon 40 in a layer of volcanic rock gives an estimate of when that layer was formed. Those fossils are found in a sedimentary layer between two volcanic layers that are 530 and 520 million years old. We can infer that the fossils came from organisms that lived about 525 million years ago. The magnetism of rocks can also provide dating information. During the formation of volcanic or sedimentary rock, iron's particles in the rock align themselves with Earth's magnetic field. When the rock hardness, their orientation is frozen in time. By measuring the magnetism of rocks with a device called a magnetometer, geologists have determined that Earth's north and south magnetic poles have reversed repeatedly in the past. Because these magnetic reversals affect the entire planet, they have left their record in rocks throughout the world. Therefore, patterns of magnetic reversals in one location can be matched with corresponding patterns elsewhere, allowing rocks to be dating when other methods are not available. The geology record. The geologists have established a geologic record of Earth's history, which is divided into three eons. On the facing page, notice this one, table 1. The first two eons, the Archean and Proterozoic. Notice that Proterozoic. Listed approximately 4 billion years. Collectively, these two ions are often referred to as the Precambrian to the Phanerozoic eons. Roughly the last half billion years encompasses most of the time that multicellular eukaryotes or eukaryotic life has existed on Earth, and it is divided into three eras: the Paleozoic, Mesozoic, and Kionzoic. Each era represents a distinct age in the history of Earth and its life. For example, the Mesozoic era is sometimes called the age of reptiles because of its abundance of reptilian fossils, including those of dinosaurs. The boundaries between the eras correspond to times of mass extinctions seen clearly in the fossil record, when many forms of life disappeared and were replaced by forms that evolved from the survivors. Lesser extinctions also mark the boundaries of many of the period into which each era has been divided. Periods are further subdivided into intervals called epochs. Notice this table also lists of the epochs of the current era, the Cenozoic mass extinctions. A species may become extinct for many reasons. Its habitat may have been destroyed, or its environment may have changed in a direction unfavorable to the species. If ocean temperatures fall up by even a few degrees, many species that are otherwise well adapted will perish, even if physically factors in the environment remain stable. Biological factors may change. The environment in which a species lives includes the other organisms that live there, and evolutionary change in one species is likely to impact others. The fossil record chronicles a number of occasions when a global environment changes were so rapid and disruptive that a majority of species were swept away. Such mass extinctions are known primarily from the decimation of hard-bodied animals that lived in shallow seas. The organisms for which the fossil record is most complete, two mass extinctions of Permian and the Cretaceous have received the most attention. That Permian mass extinction, which defines the boundary between the Paleozoic Paleozoic and Mesozoic eras, claimed about 96% of marine animal species. Terrestrial life was also affected. For example, 8 out of 27 orders of insects were wiped out. This mass extinction occurred in less than 5 million years, possibly much less an instance. In the context of geologic time, the Cretaceous mass extinction of 65 million years ago, which marks the boundary between the Mesozoic and Cenozoic eras, doomed more than half of all marine species and exterminated many families of terrestrial plants and animals, including most of the dinosaurs. The Permian mass extinction occurred at the time of enormous volcanic eruptions in what is now Siberia, constituting the most extreme episode of volcanism during the past half billion years. Besides spewing lava and ash into the atmosphere, the eruptions may have produced enough carbon dioxide to warm the global climate. Reduced temperature differences between the equator and the poles would have slowed the mixing of ocean water, which in turn would have reduced the amount of oxygen available to marine organisms. And oxygen deficit in the oceans may have played a large role in the Permian extinction. One clue to a possible cause of the Cretaceous mass extinction is a thin layer of clay enriched in iridium. Iridium is an element very rare on Earth, but common in many of the meteorites and other extraterrestrial objects that occasionally fall to Earth. Walter and Lewis and their colleagues at the University of California proposed that this clay is followed from the huge cloud of debris that billowed into the atmosphere when an asteroid on a large comet collided with Earth. This cloud would have blocked sunlight and severely disturbed the